sure you've known a person or two who was basically a hypochondriac and who every time they would see something on a website that would say that, these are the symptoms for this thing or that thing, they would immediately glom onto certain things that they saw and would come to the conclusion they had some illness, ailment, or other, right? I'm sure that's true. I've never been that guy. Don't get me wrong, I sometimes have suspicions that maybe things are happening in my life that, where I have things that maybe I can't explain or whatever, but I've never really been the hypochondriac type of guy. Well, today I wanted to talk about the idea of mental health symptoms on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. And I'm your host, and I'm Kurt, and today is Wednesday, the 17th of November of 2021. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, and on YouTube. Thank you for coming along today. Remember, Rumble is my preferred platform, and I'm going to go ahead and go through my notes today. Again, the subject, by the way, is mental health symptoms. I'm going to go through my notes to give you some idea where I am, and it has to do with this sort of hypochondria type of approach to life. Is it just me, or are there a bunch of people out there talking about this or that being a symptom of some mental condition or illness or other, when the thing in question is more or less common to a large portion of society? I'm not sitting here trying to say you don't, or someone else doesn't, need to have his or her mental health looked after. After all, it's important to take care of oneself, right? But look, when you say something like periodic unexplained anxiety is a symptom of this or that condition, I have to wonder how much of the populace at large has had periodic unexplained anxiety and doesn't have that condition. One of the things people tend to forget is a single symptom does not an illness or condition make. My son is autistic. You've probably heard me say that a lot if you've watched many of my videos. What I don't say as often as I probably should is that the symptomology for autism is not some static thing written on tablets of stone. The fact is, even if two people are autistic at roughly the same place on the spectrum, they may well have totally different manifestations of their condition. I will admit that I don't believe autism is one thing. That said, I question whether that same argument can't be made for most mental illnesses and conditions. The important thing in my mind is just because you have, or your child, or someone you know has, some symptom or frankly even multiple signs that may indicate a given condition doesn't mean the person spoken about has that condition. And frankly, it's almost always irresponsible for people not trained, whether that means having gone to medical school or a person having done copious research or spent a lot of time around people with various conditions, to suggest another person even very probably has a given illness or condition. Put simply, going past it's possible that, right, is probably a bad plan. Am I saying the person in question doesn't have that illness or condition? Not at all. What I'm trying to get across is, unless you know, you're probably not qualified to speak to that. Were it not for the fact that I deal with autism level 2 or moderate on pretty much a daily basis, I promise I would have next to zero authority to speak where autism is concerned. Even though I have more than the average bear, I still tend to tell people they should talk to others who work diagnosing such things. Just because somebody appears to have a given condition does not mean uneducated folks, and I don't mean that in the way you might think, should tag them as being in that position. So there's my notes. Here's what I want to say today. I've watched and paid a lot of attention to a young autistic boy. He's not so young anymore. He's 9 years old. And I've learned a ton in doing that. A lot. But I have to tell you something. Where I think that, particularly where moderate or severe autism is concerned, I'm probably as good at spotting it as most people. It's really hard, particularly where mild autism is concerned or being considered, to make anything like what would look like a diagnosis. And I have to tell you something, I don't try. If I tell somebody, yeah, your kid looks like they might be autistic, I'm not doing that because I want some sort of credit or because I'm looking for money or anything like that. I'm telling you, take that kid to someone who can answer the question, is this child autistic? Is this adult? Is this child autistic? Take yourself, take that child, take whoever. Not because I think that it's necessarily all that important if the person has lived the majority of their life without that knowledge. But I think it can be helpful to explain certain things and be useful. And the same applies to just about any other mental condition or a situation you can imagine. I think that what you need to do is be willing to state your opinion, being very clear that you are not a person who should be relied on where a diagnosis or prognosis is concerned unless you are qualified to speak to that particular condition. Again, I can look at an autistic person and I can say that person's autistic, and I can generally tell. Would I ever say to the parent of an autistic child, hey, your child is autistic? No, I might say, have you ever had your child checked out for autism? I might do that, but I'm never, or pretty much never, going to say, yeah, that person is autistic. I might even tell people I have a strong suspicion that this or that person is autistic. But even so, I have to be really careful to make sure that first of all, that I don't get big-headed, right, which is easy to do in the right circumstances. But second of all, and this is really important, to make sure that what I do is point people in the right direction, not try and answer for them what's going on with a given individual. This is just the reality. My one concern, though, that I see is that there are a lot of people out there who make the assumption that somebody has a given mental health issue or concern when they have not taken the time to have that individual brought in front of someone who actually probably can answer the question whether or not that concern exists. You just shouldn't give somebody the impression that you are smart enough to answer whether or not somebody's autistic or ADHD, whether they're OCD, whether they're bipolar, whatever it happens to be. You should never make that assumption. You should never make that statement unless you are a person who has the appropriate diagnostic ability to do that and you have done it and found it to be the case. This is really important as far as I'm concerned. I really concern myself over the fact that there are a lot of people who glom onto the fact that their kid or their uncle or their nephew or whoever has one or two of the symptoms of some mental condition, and they therefore assume that that individual has that mental condition. And I'm here to tell you that's not great. I've heard of many instances where autistic people have been put in mental health facilities when what really should have happened is they should have been dealt with as autistic by their family, and they should have kind of learned how to actually deal with that individual rather than having them locked away. And a lot of times they didn't have them locked away. So in the UK, it's actually not at all uncommon for the state to decide that they're going to lock a kid away who's just autistic and really probably would work just fine with the rest of society. So this is all I'm trying to say to you. Please, for the love of all that's good, if you think that somebody has a given condition, it's okay to point people in a direction that gets them diagnosed, and maybe not for the thing that you think that they should be diagnosed for. But please do not act as a layperson telling people this is what's going on. I didn't even do that with my son. I had strong suspicions that he was autistic, but until I took him to somebody and had him diagnosed, I was unwilling to make that my statement. I knew that there were things I had to do, and that's great. Okay, I need to go ahead and wrap up. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and today is Wednesday, the 17th of November of 2021. It is that middle of the week day. We're creeping up on Thanksgiving at the end of the month here. Tomorrow will be Thursday, getting ever closer to the weekend, the 18th of November of 2021. Subject for today has been mental health symptoms, and tomorrow we're going to talk on the Calvinistic idea of predestination. And I think maybe I have said, I know I've talked about this before, but I don't think that I've particularly gone head on at the idea of predestination and how you maybe ought to be looking at that. Now, of course, I'm willing to hear that I'm wrong, so if you listen to me, maybe you can set me straight tomorrow. Hope that everything is going well for you. Hope that you are doing good and that you're trekking ever closer to that weekend. And hopefully I will see you again on Thursday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Wednesday, November 17th of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.